Liu Changqing seeing off Vice-Censor-In-Chief Li on his way back to his home at Hanyang. This rootless wanderer, once the general who pacified the south, rode at the head of an army of 100,000. Dismissed from office now, with nothing to go home to. He is old and exiled, brooding on his lost glories. When he alone stood up, our borders were all peaceful. He risked his life where a single blade could end it. Now, in this vast emptiness, adrift on great rivers, the sun goes down on his hopes to bring it back. So, we continue with the poetry of Liu Changqing. The second poem of his is a poem about parting. You could say that that is the main theme. In this case, the one that is parting is not Liu Changqing himself, but this supposed friend of his, or at least person with whom he is acquainted, Vice-Censor-In-Chief Li, who is going back to his homeland in Hanyang, which would have been in the center-west area of China, I believe, a pretty remote area by that time standards, even by today's standards, I think. It's not the most populated area in China. Anyway, we say the poem is about parting. It includes evidently a certain degree of flattery towards the person who is leaving, but because of the intense praise that is heaped upon this parting person, I could say the poem is more a panegyric, really. So even more than on touching themes of parting, it's a panegyric of this great man who was a very successful general who served the country greatly. And there's also an element of state criticism in the poem, because this hyperbolic praise and the virtue of this old general contrasts with his current predicament. I mean, he is being cashiered, exiled even, sent back to his home place. It doesn't seem that he is being sent with honors and glory to retire. It seems like he has been probably the victim of some sort of purge or conflict in the imperial court, and that he is not too glad to be sent packing from the imperial administration. In praising him, there is implicitly a criticism of the government, and perhaps there is an indirect criticism at the government's treating and appreciation of Liu Changqing himself. So I would say those are the topics of the poem. The main one would be the praise of this old general, the mild criticism, or not so mild, of the government for sending him back to his homeland and for not continuing to employ him. Even a minor subthread, the passage of time, the sadness of aging, the loss, experience of past glory and success, and parting in general. So who is this Censor-In-Chief Li? I've been looking for some information about him, but I haven't found anything. You will probably need to read Chinese to be able to encounter more information about him, but he must have been a moderately important figure in the mid-years of the Hai Tang period. If what the poem says is true, he must have been sent as a general to the provinces, and quite successfully, especially to the south, it seems, where he defended the borders very successfully against barbarian intrusions. Also, his last post, Vice-Censor-In-Chief, is a pretty high post in the administration, a mid-high level post. So probably there are references to him elsewhere, but as I said, I haven't been able to find information about him. So as we usually do, let's go couplet by couplet, commenting on the poem. This rootless wanderer, once the general who pacified the south, rode at the head of an army of 100,000. So the first couplet introduces us the background for this Censor Li. Just from the title of the poem, if we didn't know the figure, we would have no idea that he was a successful general. So the first couplet tells us that. And it makes a contrast between his sad current figure. This is a contrast that will keep going on through the poem. He is now a rootless wanderer, the stereotypical image of the scholar official wandering sadly around as the traveler. So this man who looks so inconspicuous, who looks so modest and insignificant, this was a general. He pacified the south. He had 100,000 soldiers under his command. The number might be a bit hyperbolic, but he had important military commands. Second couplet. So the second couplet gives us more details about the history of this once in the past general. Dismissed from office now, with nothing to go home to. He is old and exiled, brooding on his lost glories. So the general now, or censor now, has been dismissed. So it's not like he has resigned from old age or because he wanted to. No. He has been expelled from the government and sent home. A home that means nothing to him. That sounds weird because, remember, we've talked about how scholar officials have strong ties to their home. Maybe the idea here is that perhaps his relatives have all died. Perhaps he has devoted, or the idea is that he has so devotedly served the cause of the state that he has left nothing for family and homeland and other things. So he is going back. He is old now. He is exiled, and he can only dwell in those old glories and those old achievements and services to the country that he did in the past. So there is again this dissociation between current misery, old age, rootlessness, and past glory and success. Well, we find this in many poems in this anthology. I'm thinking about the Wei Ba poem by Du Fu about a very successful painter and member of an important lineage who comes after the An Lushan rebellion to hardship and misery, contrasting with his former well-being, prosperity, and prestige. So these changing fortunes of the wheel of fortune and of human destiny are a very pathetic theme that matches well the general melancholic tone of classical Chinese poetry. Okay, the third couplet continues explaining the virtue of this man. So we know he's been a general. We know that he was quite successful in pacifying the south. We know that he's going into exile now. The third couplet continues extolling his bravery and his military prowess. When he alone stood up, our borders were all peaceful. He risked his life where a single blade could end it. So this doesn't really add anything new, but it intensifies the estimation of Vice President Censor Li's merits. It says he kept all the empire's borders at peace, which is probably a little bit of an exaggeration, and he was in danger of his life, which is probably a little bit more realistic. But after all, he was a general. The ones that are more exposed in battles are the infantry, the soldiers. Conclusion. The conclusion is bitter, melancholy, sad. Just like the conclusion to the previous poem by Liu Changqing was also melancholy and sad. If you remember, in the climbing to the temple of Duke Wu's terrace, the ending was, this sad history of the southern kingdoms. Nothing remains of it now, only the river that keeps flowing on. Here we also get a melancholy end of the day, end of life image. Now, in this vast emptiness, adrift on great rivers, the sun goes down on his hopes to bring it back. So the sun is setting. The sun goes down in spite of, presumably, Vice-Censor Li's hopes of bringing it back, which probably refers to a wish of going back in time. Not on stopping the progress of the day, but remember, the day is used commonly in Chinese poetry as a metaphor for life, and sunset is death and old age. So in this vast emptiness, so in this region, empty region of the country, adrift on great waters, so probably going up the Yangtze River, trying to, pass the gorges and reach the Han River Valley. So floating on these great rivers that keep pushing in the opposite direction, the sun goes down on his hopes. So his hopes are at an end. He is old. He will no longer serve in office anymore. He will die in his home region, far away from the court and far away from that glorious past, having to live only in memories. So, sad poem. We've encountered a lot of poems like this. The end, sometimes, of poets, of scholar officials who were not able to succeed in office. Here, we have an example of a person who did succeed in office, but still gets this bitter ending, having to live only in the memories of the past. So, nice, sad poem by Liu Changqing.